Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions for UFC 137, Penn versus Diaz. The event will take place on October 29th, 2011, and originally it was supposed to feature George St. Pierre defending his welterweight title against Carlos Condit. GSP got hurt. We're going to get that fight a little bit later on, probably at the start of 2012. Nonetheless, we have a fantastic card ahead of us. I will be doing predictions for the 5 main card fights, the 2 Spike prelims, and all 4 Facebook preliminaries for a total of 11 predictions. Before getting into those predictions, as always, Sports Interaction is the official betting site of Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions. Please check them out. There's a direct link to the site in the video detail box. Please give them a look. They have some fantastic betting odds, some prop options, and unlike most betting sites, you can combine those betting options together, the props and the winners. Not obviously you can't combine a prop and a winner from the same fight, but still you can combine a lot where other sites don't allow that. Definitely something worth considering. MMABettingOdds.com, another fantastic site, gives you all kinds of options to look at for betting, helps you figure out where the best odds are. If you want to look abroad, tells you, depending on what country you're in, where your best choice for making your online bets for MMA is. So please check out MMABettingOdds.com. And finally, this will be the first event for our Kamikaze Overdrive MMA prediction tournament, featuring 32 followers, including myself. I have a number of picks in already. Please send your user picks in as soon as possible. I'd like them in before the start of the prelims on Saturday, obviously. You're predicting 10 fights, and double check your email. If you've already sent your picks in with George St. Pierre and Carlos Condit, that fight coming off, Dustin Jacoby and Brad Tavares has been added onto the main card. We will be predicting that fight. I sent out an additional email. So that's huge. So make sure you check that out. Check back after the event. I hopefully will be posting a quick video letting you know how you did in your first round matchup. As of course, the first round will consist of UFC 137 and UFC 138. We have a lot of fights on the horizon, and let's get to the first prediction, the Facebook prelims and the Spike prelims. Alright, let's take a quick look at the preliminary fights, 6 in all. First off, Chris Kamikaze versus Francis Carmont in the middleweight division. Kamikaze is returning to the UFC after defeating Joey Villaseñor, while Carmont is making his debut. Both fighters are vulnerable to the submission. Each man has been tapped out on several occasions. Carmont is a solid striker and will have a 2.5-inch reach advantage on Kamikaze. Carmont, he's patient, but he's very dangerous, and he's won 8 fights by submission using a number of different holds, and he has decent judo-style throws and trips. Kamikaze has octagon experience, but I like Francis Carmont to pick up the victory by submission. Brandon Vera versus Elliot Marshall. The loser of this fight could be getting their walking papers, especially if it's Brandon Vera, who got a reprieve after being cut because his defeat against Thiago Silva was changed to a no contest. Elliot Marshall struggled in his last outing against Louise Kane as he was unable to get the fight to the mat and got picked apart on the feet. Marshall's stand-up is improving, but his bread and butter is his jiu-jitsu. Vera has never been submitted and should be able to win the striking exchanges. His back's against the wall, so I'm going to take Brandon Vera by stoppage. Next, Ramsey Najim versus Danny Downs. Najim's impressive run in The Ultimate Fighter came to an abrupt end when he got knocked out by heavy-handed Tony Ferguson. Najim is a solid wrestler, using his grappling skills to earn 2 submission wins on the show and 2 more in 5 pro fights. Danny Downs is the training partner of wrestling standout Van Askren, so he should have lots of opportunities to work on his wrestling. But since starting his WEC UFC career, he has had issues with takedowns, only able to defend 7 of 21 attempts over his last 3 bouts. Najim will use his wrestling to control the fight. Downs is a tough competitor, but I'll take Najim by grinding decision. Scott Jorgensen versus Jeff Curran. Curran is making his return to the UFC for the first time since 2004, where he last fought at lightweight. Fighting now at a more natural weight class, he will look to rebuild his career, having won 4 of his last 5 after snapping a 4-fight losing streak. Jorgensen rebounded nicely from his title fight defeat with a knockout win in his UFC debut. Curran is a BJJ black belt with 19 submission wins, but he has had issues with strong wrestlers, resulting in a large amount of decision defeats. Scott Jorgensen should be able to hold his own on the feet and use his wrestling to dominate. Scott Jorgensen takes this one by decision. Moving to the Spike prelims, Tyson Griffin versus Bart Palashevsky. This is an interesting bout. Tyson Griffin dropped down to featherweight looking to gain a physical edge over his opponents. Unfortunately, Bart Palashevsky made a similar career choice and will have both a height and reach advantage in this matchup. Palashevsky is making his UFC debut, but he's a veteran of 49 fights and has fought both in the IFL and WEC on several occasions, so I don't expect the debut to be an issue. Griffin's win over Manny Gambarian was much closer than expected, and Tyson needed to rely on his wrestling and size advantage to help him grind out the win. If Palashevsky can keep the fight standing, he should have an edge with the striking, and he is a BJJ black belt with 11 submissions. If the fight does hit the mat, I'll take another upset and the money, and Bart Palashevsky wins this one by decision. Finally, Donald Cerrone versus Dennis Siver, potentially one of the best fights on the card. This is an excellent matchup, and the winner of this fight should be in consideration for a lightweight title eliminator bout. Cerrone's won 5 in a row, while Seaver has earned victories in 8 of his last 9. Both fighters are multidimensional. Cerrone earned his first career knockout victory in his last bout. He has solid Muay Thai and 9 wins by submission. Dennis Seaver is a kickboxing champion, compiling 5 career knockouts, but he is also trained in Sambo and is a BJJ purple belt with 8 career submissions, 2 in the UFC. Donald Cerrone should have an edge on the mat with his submission game, but Dennis Seaver's vastly improving takedown defense has made it difficult to get him to the ground. Over his last 2 fights, Seaver has successfully defended all but 5 28 takedown attempts by his opponents and 69% over his career. Cerrone will have a 3-inch reach advantage, but Dennis has had success against fighters in the past with similar reach advantages, incorporating a wide variety of kicks to help him deal with the distance. Cerrone's striking has looked fantastic in his recent matchups, but Seaver is on another level compared to his past opponents. I like the betting odds on Seaver as the underdog. My pick is Dennis Seaver to defeat Donald Cerrone by decision. And those are my predictions for the prelims. Let's get to the 5 main card fights. To kickstart the main card, we are in the featherweight division as George Roop, 12-8-1, will welcome UFC newcomer 24-4 Hatsu Hayoki. Hayoki has won 4 in a row in 9 of his last 10, while Roop earned an impressive knockout victory over Josh Crispy to return to the win column. Now, George Roop has moved between lightweight, featherweight, and even spent a little time at 135 pounds. Since starting his WEC UFC career in 2008, he hasn't been able to put together 2 consecutive victories, with an impressive knockout win over the Korean Zombie, quickly erased by a first-round knockout defeat against Mark Hominick. Conversely, Hatsu Hayoki is considered one of the elite of the featherweight division. His only defeat over his last 14 bouts was incredibly controversial, and he holds 2 wins over Mark Hominick, and he won the Sengoku featherweight title with a dominant performance against Marlon Sandro. But Hayoki will enter the UFC having seen a plethora of fighters make their octagon debut with similar hype, but then fail to meet expectations, especially Japanese fighters. George Roop has 3 wins by knockout, including his last over Josh Crispy, 4 by submission and 5 by decision. He is talented on the mat, but he has been tapped out on 4 occasions. His biggest asset is probably his abnormal height, which at 6'1" almost always gives him an advantage over his much shorter opponents. Unfortunately for him, Hayoki is also a tall featherweight at 5'11", so Roop won't enjoy as big of an advantage. In Roop's win over Crispy, he looked good both with his striking and his ground and pound, but I attribute that partly to Crispy gassing and turning into a human punching bag. What concerns me is that Crispy was able to complete 4 or 5 takedowns, and over his career, Roop has had issues in this area. Hayoki has earned 12 of his 24 wins via submission, including 2 of his last 3. Hayoki's ability to get his opponent to the mat is impressive. In the footage I've seen, he has used a wrestling-style shot, a body lock from the clinch, a trip. He will also catch his opponent's kicks, and he also pulls guard and then orchestrates a sweep. Like Roop, he has abnormally long limbs and uses them to control his opponent and create submission opportunities that seem to come out of nowhere. Both guys are talented on the mat, but I give the edge to Hayoki, and I anticipate that he will be able to use the cage to supplement his grappling skills. Now, Hayoki's striking bears a slight resemblance to Nick Diaz's Stockton slap. He is patient and prefers using technique over power when punching. He will counter-strike with jabs and did a nice job enduring the aggressive striking of Marlon Sandro. Now, George Roop's striking looks solid against Crispy, but he really struggled against the more technical style of both Eddie Wineland and Mark Hominick. Roop stopped Crispy with a wicked body shot and showed effective 1-2 combos, following them up with front, body, and head kicks. Hayoki will also throw kicks, and he likes to mix in a knee strike when he gets the opportunity. When he feels he has an opponent in trouble, Hayoki can increase his aggression level looking for the finish. Hayoki has never been stopped, but he was rocked early by a punch from Michihiro Omigawa. Both guys have fought into the later rounds, but based on Hayoki's more relaxed style, I give him an edge in endurance. My biggest concern is that Hayoki won't live up to the expectations like so many before. Now, that being said, I think his style will translate better to the cage as he's an intelligent and calculated fighter. Look for Hayoki to take Roop down at will, and I've got Hatsu Hayoki to defeat George Roop by submission. Moving to the heavyweight division, Roy Big Country Nelson, 16-6, will square off with 27-9-2 Mirko Cro Cop. Cro Cop has dropped 2 in a row, both by knockout, while Nelson has also been unsuccessful in his last 2 trips to the octagon. This fight could be impacted by a couple of specific body parts. Roy Nelson's oversized midsection has proven his downfall in his last 2 bouts, while Mirko Cro Cop, who once was known for the devastation brought about by his legs, is now quickly earning a reputation for his faltering chin. Despite his abnormal physique, Roy Nelson has a lot going on for him. He's a BJJ black belt, he has an iron chin and serious power in his hands. but this all becomes a moot point when Roy gets tired. Statistically, Roy's 8 knockout wins, 6 have come in the first round, and his submission numbers are similar. Further adding to the notion that Big Country is a better first-half fighter, he owns a 3-4 record in decisions. Since joining the UFC, Cro Cop has suffered 3 knockouts, 2 of which occurring in the final round, tossing the third-round defeat he suffered as a result of punches against Junior Dos Santos, and it appears he is most vulnerable in the later stages of his fights. Combining these two trends, and we have a scenario that favors the Croatian. In this matchup, Miracle will need to maintain the distance and rely on his legs to do the majority of the damage. Nelson is tough to knock out, so Miracle shouldn't focus as much on his head kicks. Instead, he should look to take away Roy's base and mobility by attacking with low and body kicks. Cro Cop could also rely on his counter strikes using his jabs to damage Nelson as he comes forward. Statistically, Mirko's striking accuracy and defense are both better than Nelson's, so if he's able to keep this bout standing, it is a winnable fight. Roy's biggest weapon is a powerful overhand right. He stopped both Stefan Struve and Brendan Schaub with it. Even though Roy has serious jiu-jitsu credentials, he hasn't earned a submission win since 2006, and his takedown numbers are anything but impressive, going 2 for 18 over his last 6 fights. Combine this with Mirko stuffing almost 80% of attempted takedowns, and I don't think we see a lot of action on the mat. Where Roy will be most effective is in the clinch along the cage. He has had success with this before, where he was able to get in close quarters, limiting his opponent's speed and forcing him to carry his weight for the duration of the bout. When Cro Cop lost to Czech Congo, Czech used a similar strategy, pinning Mirko along the wall and punishing him in tight. Before Schaub scored a late knockout, he too found success controlling Cro Cop on the cage. This is not to say the Croatian is defenseless here. He did bloody up Schaub with a short elbow, and he also has some effective punches in tight. As I said, Mirko's striking is good enough to win this fight, but recently he has been tentative to engage. Nelson will use the clinch to limit Cro Cop's opportunities to attack, and if Mirko hesitates, when he does get the chance, he won't land enough to earn a knockout or even a decision win. Mirko could be making his final appearance in the UFC, which should provide extra incentive to perform, but Nelson received some serious criticism from Dana White after the Mir matchup, and having read that he dropped 20 pounds in the first month since that fight has me convinced that he used that criticism as motivation. Mirko is at the best when he's able to stalk his opponents, but when he's backing up, he's not the same fighter, and this is what I expect to see a lot of in this matchup. So my prediction is Roy Nelson to defeat Mirko Cro Cop by knockout. Continuing heavyweight division, 5-0 Meathead Mitrione will battle 26-6-2 Czech Congo. Mitrione is coming off an impressive knockout victory, while Congo is looking to build upon potentially the biggest come-from-behind win in UFC history. Czech Congo is going to have a considerable experience advantage with 34 fights to Mitrione's 5. Further, Congo represents a significant step up in competition as he has fought some of the biggest names in the business, while 3 of Mitrione's victories have come against fighters no longer in the UFC. As a veteran, Congo's fighting style is well established. He's primarily a striker with power in his punches and kicks, holding 11 wins by knockout, 6 in the UFC. He will use the cage to control his opponent, delivering knees, elbows, and punches in tight, along with some less than reputable maneuvers like groin strikes and holding onto his adversary's shorts. His ground game isn't the most impressive, but if he gets on top, he can do some damage with his ground and pound. On the negative side, Congo has been knocked out once, but he was also dropped by Frank Mir before getting submitted and was all but knocked unconscious by Pat Barry prior to the aforementioned turn of events. So I suspect that his chin isn't as ironclad as his record would indicate. Looking now at Mitrione, Matt is still developing his approach and has made significant strides each time he hits the cage. He is one of those fighters that seems to make noteworthy improvements between each appearance. What we have seen from Meathead is that he's incredibly light on his feet, which has limited his opponent's ability to land strikes. Mitrione has avoided 71% of strikes attempted against him. Joey Beltran had the most success, needing 207 attempts to land 93, translating to 31%. Matt has knockout power in his hands, especially his left, which he floored both Tim Hegg and Christian Moorcraft with. He has been developing a nice inside leg kick, which decimated Kimbo Slice, cutting his base out from underneath of him. Now, we haven't seen much of Mitrione on the ground, and for the most part, it has been defensive. In fact, that was the basis for my last prediction when I took Moorcraft to upset Mitrione. I anticipated Christian Moorcraft being able to cut the cage off and either punish Matt along the wall or on the ground. This will be a similar strategy to what I expect Congo will try to employ. The problem that Moorcraft had was gaining control. Mitrione's speed kept Moorcraft constantly a step behind, and all the while Christian was attempting to get in close, Matt was beating him up. Rarely can you refer to a heavyweight as elusive, but Mitrione is just that. He moves laterally really well, mixes in feints, and keeps his opponent guessing. Kongo is a far better striker than Moorcraft, so if he can't close the distance, it won't be nearly as lopsided. But looking at the Kongo-Travis Browne fight, Czech had trouble with the speed and freewheeling striking of Browne. Browne was continually in motion, jumping in and out, attacking and retreating in a similar fashion to how Mitrione operates. Kongo got rocked a couple of times in that fight, and he didn't find success until Browne slowed down. In this fight, I don't believe Mitrione's endurance will fail, because he uses technique when striking, not just power, and this is not nearly as draining, so Kongo's going to have to deal with Matt's speed from bell to bell. Look for Mitrione to attack and then retreat, while Kongo, who has a tendency to stand flat-footed, will struggle to land, freezing up as Mitrione increases his intensity. So my prediction is Matt Mitrione to defeat Czech Kongo by stoppage. In the newly crowned main event of the night, former welterweight and lightweight champion BJ the Prodigy Penn, 16-7-2, will battle the last man to hold the Strikeforce welterweight strap, 25-7-1 Nick Diaz. Diaz has won 10 in a row and has a 6-4 mark in the UFC, while Penn is coming off a draw with John Fitch and is undefeated in 2 fights since returning to 170. Nick Diaz was originally scheduled to fight for the title, but that fell through. Now he's got his main event spot back, and with a win, he could find himself fighting for the championship again. BJ Penn, who has been defeated twice by the current welterweight champ, is looking to show that despite his lack of success, he is worthy of another shot. Both fighters are well-rounded, each is a BJJ black belt with solid submission numbers, and neither's been tapped out. In the striking department, Penn has 7 knockouts, including wins over Matt Hughes, Sean Shirk, and a doctor stoppage over Diego Sanchez. Nick Diaz has equally impressive numbers with 13 knockouts, including Paul Daly and Robbie Lawler. Both guys have suffered stoppage defeats during their careers, but neither has actually been knocked out. Contrary to their success with finishing opponents, each has a below 500 record in decisions, and for the most part, this can be attributed to their respective struggles with talented wrestlers. Taking a look at how these men differ, Nick will be 4 inches taller, and he will also have a 4-inch reach advantage, and this could play a significant role in the striking exchanges. Diaz's technique focuses on continually battering his opponent with a barrage of jabs and hooks while staying out of range. Diaz will counterstrike, but he is most effective when he pushes forward aggressively and backs his opponent against the cage. When he gets his adversary covering up, he changes levels and begins to focus on the body, as we saw when he dropped Frank Shamrock. Now, Nick doesn't have one-punch knockout power, earning the majority of his wins by TKO when his opponent fades under the pressure. On the other hand, BJ Penn does have that type of power, and he showed it when he stopped Matt Hughes. Against Diego Sanchez, Penn's counter-striking was incredibly effective, landing and dropping Diego on several occasions. As successful as he was in that fight against Frankie Edgar, Penn wasn't able to connect with regularity because of Edgar's elusive style. Over 2 fights, Penn only landed 128 of 430 attempts, which is a 29% success rate, a far cry from the 70% he landed against Diego, or his overall average of 53%. Comparatively, Diaz's striking accuracy is 10% lower than Penn's, but he also attempts more than as a result of lands more. To put things in perspective, only once has Penn surpassed the 100 strikes landed mark, while Diaz has done it 3 times in his last 6 bouts, with a 4th falling just short. On average, BJ lands just over 2.5 strikes per minute, while Diaz is closer to 6. This is a significant stat, especially when combined with the 4-inch reach advantage of Diaz. If BJ is unable to find his range, Nick will most definitely outstrike him. Finally, having rewatched Penn John Fitch, it was evident that Penn faded in the 3rd round, which ultimately cost him the win. Whether it is his endurance or something mental, BJ just isn't the same fighter in the later stages of a fight, especially when he's being pushed. Joe Rogan put it best when he said that BJ does not like being bullied. In his fights with Kenny Florian and Sanchez, BJ dictated the pace, but against Fitch, GSP, and even Frankie Edgar, when the pressure was being put on the Prodigy, he wasn't able to respond. Nick Diaz is a talented striker, he has a solid chin, he will have the superior cardio, and he's capable of bringing pressure from bell to bell. BJ is tough to finish, but Nick possesses all the elements needed to get the job done. So my prediction is Nick Diaz to defeat BJ Penn by TKO. And if this fight were to get changed from a 3-round fight to a 5-round fight, I like my prediction that much more. Alright, Kamikaze Countdown. I'm going to do this quickly. I have 2 things I want to talk about. The first being the UFC, as I said, they raised the prices by $5 of pay-per-views, and then they pushed it back 10 o'clock. I think the smart move would be to do is put it back, leave it at 10 o'clock. I understand the reasoning for that. Drop your prices actually $5 lower. I think that will get people to buy the pay-per-view more than pushing it back at 10 and upping it by $5. Secondly, I'm calling you out, Czech Kongo. I've done it once before. You're a dirty fighter. You have a bad habit of doing some less than reputable things in the cage, knee strikes, grabbing shorts, and just doing whatever it takes to bring a dark cloud over your matchups. I hope he can get through this fight without doing anything generally stupid or just embarrassing. but the chances are very limited. But Congo, let's see what you can do. Kamikaze Countdown, thanks for watching. Alright guys, so those are my predictions for UFC 137. I know this was a longer video and I thank you for sticking with me. But looking at these fights, some of these fights are the evenest we've seen in a long time from start to finish. A lot of fights could go either way conceivably. Before I go, MMABettingOdds.com, please check them out. Very cool website. SportsInteraction.com, check them out. Official betting site. That's where I do my betting and a lot of you should consider doing it. They're really making strides with how they set up their odds. And finally, tournament predictions. Get them in ASAP. I've only got one actual full matchup with both guys who've sent their predictions in. Please, as soon as possible, send them to my email. And that's all I've got to say for now. I'll see you back here for UFC 138. Thanks for watching.